You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to another episode of Media Opinions. It's been a while since I've done one of these, and I figured it was about time to do another one. As I said, I'm going to try to do at least one regular, old-school Fugitive Red-Eye video every night this week. I'm going to try to do at least one, and I've been consistent about that this whole week, so we're going to keep it up. Then I might do a stream again later tonight like I have been. We'll see. Besides all that, let's actually get into this video. So for today's topic of media opinions, I'm going to talk about gatekeeping. And I have done a video on gatekeeping before in the past, although my opinions have actually changed a decent amount on the subject. What exactly is gatekeeping? Well, there's a couple of factors to it. Gatekeeping comes in many forms, but it is often a fan base trying to keep people who are not ideal for the fan base out of a fan base. And I realize I said fan base a ton of times in a sentence there, but there it is. This can take many forms, such as telling people they're not true fans, which I actually think can often be true. Although sometimes I think people can go overboard with it. And in the past, when I did the other video, even then I said that gatekeeping is good for keeping normies out of a fan base and ruining it. Because the truth is, there are a lot of people who will infiltrate fan bases and try to ruin a property to make it so that they can twist it to their own agenda. People who come in and demand that it change are very bad for an intellectual property, especially when it's owned by a corporation who's willing to make those changes and destroy what something is supposed to be. Obviously, I'm pretty cynical when it comes to pop culture nowadays, but I definitely think gatekeeping absolutely has a place. Because gatekeeping isn't simply being elitist. What gatekeeping actually also entails is being the gatekeeper to show people who you know would be a good fit for a franchise to help guide them to that franchise. For instance, I will share things with certain friends of mine, and I won't share certain things with those friends. It just depends on if I think it'll be a good fit and they'll enjoy it for what it is. That's not to say I don't think someone can enjoy something despite of aspects they don't like, because obviously I have plenty of things that I like that I don't like aspects about. Obviously you're not going to fully like anything. But I think in order to keep properties that you enjoy pure, you do have to do at least some degree of gatekeeping, where you sort of help introduce people to it who would be a good fit, and to call out the people who are clearly not fans of that property and are just trying to use it to change it to try and push some sort of social agenda. Gatekeeping is often used as a dirty word, and I just don't think that's fair, because I think it's absolutely essential for maintaining the purity of a property. Again, these may seem like unimportant things, but really culture is important. Culture is the basis for everything in our world, and that includes pop culture. I'd say much more people care about the newest Marvel schlock than any sort of new tax plan or something like that. Much more people care about the newest video game coming out than they do about the pipes in Flint, Michigan, or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, people care much more about pop culture than they do about news and politics. It's just a fact. That's how people typically are. The vast majority of people don't care about what's going on in the world. They just care about what they can consume. And that is why we have to try and keep those properties pure, because when they're not, they're bastardized and raped, and then they're turned into something they're not, and then used to push ideology that is ultimately harmful to us as a society. As I said, I think things can go too far. I think the Undertale fan base can be pretty obnoxious with how elitist they are when it comes to saying you have to play the game a certain way, things like that. And obviously I'm a proponent of things like death of the author, but I also am a person who is in favor of the artist's vision to an extent, which actually will be the subject of probably tomorrow night's video, because I held a poll for whether gatekeeping or the artist's vision would be tonight's, and I think that tomorrow will be the artist's vision, which sort of ties into this, because I do think that having a vision that the creator has is the main purpose of something. But I also think that interpretation is another valid purpose, because again, I obviously interpret things vastly differently than sometimes the author intends. So obviously there's a balance and a nuance, but again, we'll get into that more next time. What I'm really saying here is if you enjoy something, you do need to kind of protect it. Because there are plenty of people who want to infiltrate, subvert, and change it. And bringing things to a mass appeal will cause problems, because it will cause normies to come into it, and then they'll come and want it changed, they'll demand it changed, try to cancel it, try to say that people who like it are bad, all sorts of things like that. That's why I really like that Toshio Maida's work kind of naturally gatekeeps itself. Like, obviously there's some normies who are into it, like the Anime Man talked about it once. But the nice thing about Toshio Maida's work is that not only does it have the stigma of being hentai, but it's also rare, out of print, and usually has a price you have to pay that's pretty extensive to buy it. Like, they're usually super expensive and rare. Obviously, there's piracy online and things like that, but for those who are true fans who want it, you gotta spend money for it. And I do think that the high price and rarity of the actual physical releases of much of his work is a good barrier to entry. It's a good gatekeep as well. In addition to the fact that, again, it does also, like I said, have the stigma of being a hentai. Particularly Yorotsuki Doji is, again, I think his best work, but all of his work is at least good. That's why I actually think hentai is probably the purest form of art currently that exists, because the artist's vision is what completely drives it. And it's really hard to demand change for a hentai, because hentai is already such a controversial thing, because it's based completely in, sexual content, or at least that's the theory, right? Obviously, with Toshio Maeda, I don't think that's the case. I think that it's a much more expressive and interesting, deep story that he has in the vast majority of his works. But to the average Joe, it's just going to seem like more anime porn. And that's good, because that's going to keep him uninterested and going to keep it out of the public's eye. As I've said, there's a reason when I like something, I don't want it to come back. I don't want it to get bastardized because studios are going to make it woke. They're going to pretend it's always had some message it never had. They're going to rewrite it. They're going to remove elements that make it what it is. And they're going to fundamentally change it into something that it's not. That's what happens with most modern properties that are adaptations of older properties, and why I typically like the things that I like to stay unknown. Obviously, I don't want them to stay completely unknown. I talk about the things I like all the time on this fucking channel, so obviously that's not completely the case, but you get what I mean. I don't want it to be mainstream. When something is niche, it's special. There's a certain quality to it that you don't get with anything else, because it's purely based on the artistic input of its creators and fan base at the time. It's not just something that comes out of a corporation that's shat out. Spider-Man as a comic, when it started with Steve Ditko and Stan Lee, was great. You look at it now, and it's just a cash cow that's milked endlessly by Disney. Devilman is arguably the most influential manga to the manga genre, and it was super influential on anime, video games as well. Like, anime, video games, and manga would not be where they are if it weren't for Go Nagai and Devilman in particular. But look at Crybaby. It's super modernized and has a bunch of trash in it because it meant to appeal to a mainstream audience. Well, I say mainstream, but it's still got pretty graphic sex scenes and gore, so obviously there's going to be detractors for that reason. But they definitely drastically changed it and brought a whole new fan base to it, which has caused a lot of problems. Just like how Elden Ring brought people's attention to Berserk, who are now demanding that the first chapter be changed because it has rape in it, or because it's, insensitive, or over-the-top and violent. People want to pretend that they're a fan of something when they don't actually know what that something is. Berserk is filled with all sorts of controversial shit, and normies going and finding it is only going to cause problems. Anyway, I think I've said my piece here. I'm probably not going to do a whole lot of editing on this one since I've been pretty consistent at pausing it when I need a second, so I think this one's going to be more or less okay as is. But yeah. I may or may not stream tonight. A new version of the DeLuca family actually just came out, so I actually want to try playing that, so we'll see. But anyway, I hope you guys had fun. Like I said, I think gatekeeping is important. I think it's a good thing, and I think we should do more of it. Anyway, this has been Fugitive Red Eye. Have a good one. Toodles.